All right. Say the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher notan haTorah. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Okay. Dust of cobwebs. Ezekiel 29. Okay, before we closed, I gave you a breakdown of a couple of scriptures concerning Egypt. Okay. All right. So we're talking about the gradual decline of Egypt. This portion of Leviticus kind of spans over chapters 29 through to 32. It kind of breaks up into different sections. One way to break it up would be 29 verses 1 to 16. 29 verses 17 to chapter 30 verse 19. 29 verse 17 to chapter 30 verse 19. Chapter 30 verse 20 to verse 26. Chapter 31 verse 1 to 18. And chapter 32 verses 1 to 32. Okay. So this is basically concerning Pharaoh, but like what we saw when he took on the king of Tyre, right? Remember, he spoke about the prince of Tyre, and then he spoke about the king of Tyre. He spoke about the land of Tyre. He went from a warning into a dirge or a lamentation. He wept over what was going to happen, right? We're going to see something similar here, but at the same way, when we looked at the king of Tyre, he started off talking about the king of Tyre, and then he went on to someone else. Who was the someone else?
Hasatan.
Right, Hasatan. We spoke about him in Eden, we spoke about imperfection, we spoke about his pride and his arrogance leading to his destruction, right? And I took you to Revelations 12, and we saw kind of more or less a timeline of what Yeshua was talking about, right? So after the time Mashiach came, he was cast out, all right? So we sit here and we look at it. It's going to use Pharaoh in a similar sort of fashion, and we're gonna see something here which is going to bring us into other imagery, okay? And it's going to get a little bit weird and wonderful, but I mean, what's Wednesday night without weird and wonderful, right? So we're going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole because this theme seems to come up in more than one place when he uses this allegory when concerning Pharaoh specifically. Okay, you'll understand what I'm talking about in about 5 minutes. All right, 29 verse 1. On the 12th day of the 10th month of the 12th year, the word of Adonai came to me. Okay, so we can nail down what?
Mine says the 10th year.
12th day of the 10th month of the 12th year. Yours says the 10th
10th year.
Same, 10th year.
I suppose it depends on when they count it, but I'll check that. The word of Adonai came to me. We take it around the time of 588 to 585, somewhere there, 585, 587. Okay? It says, human being, turn your face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, prophesy against him and against all of Egypt. Speak out and say to him that Adonai Elohim says. Okay, Adonai in small caps, so that's the Lord. Elohim. Remember when we talk about Adonai Elohim, where do we normally see it, or where do we first see it? In creation, right? So he's already making the illusion that, again, Pharaoh, who created. Okay? And the fact that he uses the title Adonai should tell you something as well. Right? Right. So who's higher than Pharaoh? Adonai, right? Pharaoh, it's a king's title. It's like Pharaoh equals Herod equals prince. It's just a title. Obviously, you have to look through history and try and identify which Pharaoh and who was what was going on at that time. All right? Says, so he's going to come out against him. He says, I am against you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, you big crocodile. Any other translation?
Great monster.
Great monster. Literally calls him a dragon. Okay? So, first little hint at something here. Alright? Lying in the streams of the Nile, you say, my Nile is mine, I made it for myself, but I will put hooks in your jaws and make your Nile fish stick to your scales. Yes, I will bring you up from the Nile with all the Nile fish sticking to your scales and leave you in a desert, you and all the Nile fish. Okay, so if it was a crocodile, why would you use that image?
Because of the pagan god.
Okay, Nile crocodile, let's maybe find him. Alright, number one, what else? Pagan god for what?
For strength and fertility, or I'm not going to say his name.
Was the god of Pharaoh
Yeah, what was his function?
protection?
Right,
Oh,
protecting Pharaoh himself. So he makes an illusion to him here, okay? So he uses it and he says, I control the Nile. Remember, the Nile was to be worshipped because of what it gave them. It made them wealthy, it made them illustrious, it made them stuff, and the protector of Pharaoh was in it. You will fall in an open field and not be gathered or buried, but I will give you as food to wild animals and to the birds. Then all who live in Egypt will know that I am Adonai, because they have been support made of straw for the house of Israel. Okay, what does that mean?
Are we going back to Passover?
Yeah.
No. Support made of straw.
That's not so well supported.
Okay, so what happens if I were to lean on a bunch of straw and put my weight on it?
Goes down.
Okay, would it splinter my hand? Probably. Okay, so it'll probably pierce my skin and push me down. So what is he referring to?
What did they make the bricks out of when they were doing?
No.
What were they making when they were making the bricks out of?
Straw and mortar. But
Yeah.
remember, when Assyria was coming down, they went and they made an alliance with Pharaoh, and Pharaoh came up, right? And they were trying to use the Egyptians and Pharaoh to create the buffer against them. Okay, did it work? No, they got beaten back down and pushed all the way back. So it actually hurt them more, because even though Israel, instead of turning to God, they turned to Pharaoh to save them, when they came up to that point, okay, I think it was Babylonians and Assyrians, it happened more than once, they beat them down, and when they started to come down, who else was going to save them? They knew that the Israelites had made an alliance with them already. So would that make any of them happy? Not in the least. So that which was supposed to help me actually became a hindrance to me. It became something that was going to cause me more pain than actually be allowed to take my weight. All right? When they grasped you in the hand, you splintered, and threw all their shoulders out of joint. When they leaned on you, you broke, and you made them all wrench their backs. Therefore, Adonai Elohim says, I will bring the sword against you and eliminate both people and your animals. The land of Egypt will become a desolate waste, and they will know that I am Adonai. Because he said, the Nile is mine, I have made it. Okay? So, he's claiming again, what do you think this is doing for his ego? If you claim that you made the Nile,
That he's a god.
right, if I'm the one who gives Egypt its ever-present source of vegetation, of papyri, of all of that stuff. Remember, without the Nile, Egypt's nothing. That's why it was worshipped. It made Egypt great, because it was, every couple of years, it would flood its banks, it would bring minerals into the soil, it would make the land fertile, they would be able to sail along it, they would fish from it. It was like an ever-abundant stream of money. Now, Pharaoh is saying he's the source. Remember at the beginning of the thing, he says, I have this against you, you big crocodile. You think it's all about you, you think that's your point. Right? The Nile is mine. The Nile who belonged to God. God put him there. God allowed him to do it. What he did with that was made it about himself. Okay? So I'm against you and your Nile, and I'll make the land of Egypt a total desolate waste from Migdol to Savannah. all the way to the border of Ethiopia. So if you look at Migdal Sarin and Nubia, it's basically from north to south. He's going to take it down. No human foot will pass through it. No animal foot will pass through it. It will be uninhabited for 40 years. 40?
Yeah.
All right. So he's talking about a time of generation to pass, number one, or also a time of testing even for Pharaoh itself. If God wanted to strike them down completely, he would have. Right? God is always trying to get the attention of the next generation. Even though maybe your grandparents, using a silly example, didn't see it, doesn't mean that you don't have to. Even though they rejected God, doesn't mean that you have to. Everything about this is about you. You have a choice. Okay? Yes, I will make the land of Egypt desolate, even when compared with the desolate countries. Likewise, your cities in comparison with other ruined cities, they will be desolate 40 years. I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and disperse them through the countries. For this is what Adonai Elohim says. At the end of 40 years, I will gather the Egyptians from the peoples where they were scattered. I will restore the fortunes of Egypt and cause them to return to the land of their origin. Origin Patros. But they will be a humble kingdom, the humblest of kingdoms. It will never again dominate other nations, and I will reduce them so that they will never again rule other nations. Okay, let's stop. Where's Egypt now?
Yeah, in this state.
All right. When people go to Egypt, they're quite surprised because you hear of the city and the opulence and all the rest of it, and really, unfortunately, at this point, it's just a big slum. Right? You see the photos of Egypt and the pyramids and all the rest of it from this side, and it looks desolate, but just on the other side, there's a whole bunch of poor people running around trying to make ends meet. This was the nation in the time of Moses. And for a long time, they rivaled the best in the world. They had it all. Why can't they get it together now? Because God said, never again will you rise up, lest you
Become humble.
No, you need to become humble. But if Israel keeps on leaning on you, how are they ever going to learn to lean on God? Right? Egypt is always the go-to for Israel for some reason. We left there, oh no, we need to go back. Oh no, we're in trouble, we should never have left. Oh no, we're sitting in that situation, we should go back and let's ask them to help us. They never ever saw in their own sight the greatness that God aspired to.
That's also true when they had the famine in Israel. They all went to Egypt.
Every time, it's a fail-safe. And we have these moments in our life that we want to go back to the way we were. We want to go back to our situations. We want to go back to our previous callings. Whatever your Mitzrayim is, whatever God pulled you out from, He put you in a situation where you can't do it by yourself for a reason. Lest you become arrogant and think it's all about you. Right? To become a disciple, to walk after Yeshua ways, to let the Ruach flow through you so that you can acknowledge in yourself and everybody else around it that it has to do, that God has to do it. Otherwise, how else is He going to get His glory? If you think it's an impossible task, it is. Right? If you can do this thing called Christian living, being a disciple, walking in every day and reflecting God, if you think you can do this in your own strength, you're wrong. You let Him down daily. But it's amazing that when you acknowledge that you're weak and you need Him, and yet you ask Him to flow through you, that all of a sudden people see Him in a way that you've never even knew possible. You with me? Right? Sometimes people will look at you and they'll ask you for a piece of advice, and out will come something that you didn't even think you had in you. Sometimes I'm teaching and I'll be saying something, and then only afterwards I'll go, that was really cool, I never thought of that before. He's teaching me while He's teaching you. And only then can you start to acknowledge the fact that you go, hang on a second, this is everything to do with Him. Okay?
Does he refer to the other, I can't remember that I'm asking, to the other nations like this? Because if you didn't know He was talking about Egypt, you'd almost think He's talking about Israel. Because He's scattering them, bringing them back, and making them.
It does bring judgment on them, but there's always this think of hope. It happens in Isaiah, I think Isaiah 19, it says as well that He's going to gather them, He's going to bring them. Assyria, He also mentions
That He'll gather and bring back.
that they're also going to worship Him and build altars in the same as Egypt. So those which he has judged, even though they have missed, he still says, I'm going to have mercy on the land and I'm going to bring you back and then I'm going to lift you up. We'll go to Isaiah 19 a little later. Moreover, there will no longer be a source of confidence for Israel to turn to. Rather, it will only bring to mind their guilt in having turned to them before. Then they will know that I am Adonai Elohim. So who brought judgment on Egypt?
God did,
Right? And because of what?
because it was prophesied before.
For 400 years.
No. We've got a twofold response here. One, he's punishing Israel. He said, I'm taking away your crutch. If you think you can lean on them, you're wrong. I am God. Pharaoh's not. You should have learned that in the Exodus. Pesach should have told you those stories. Why do you think they can save you when they couldn't even save you from me? Who's greater, them or me? Number two, he's punishing Pharaoh. You should have learned the message from Pesach. I will be the source. I will be the staff. I will be the thing that holds Israel together. Don't get in the way. Now that's a big lesson for most of us here. If Abba is dealing with someone, don't get in the way. I know, listen to me, if you're sitting there and you're dealing with someone who hasn't given their life to Christ, completely, has refused to be baptized, knows about him, knows the stories, knows all the rest of it, and sits there and goes, no, and then they go through hard times, don't pat him on the back and say it's okay. Don't. I know it sounds mean. Why do I say it? Because if God doesn't break them, they'll never hold on to him. And if they don't realize they need him, they'll never be baptized. And if they never get baptized, where's their salvation?
I think that goes for believers as well, because we have many believers who are doing wrong, and then your other believers pat you on the back and say, look, yeah, you're fine, or
If they're walking in
everything's
sin,
okay, we'll be okay.
if they're walking in sin, acknowledge the fact. Say, listen, you're doing wrong. Maybe you're getting smacked on the nose simply because you're not following what God told you. Maybe he's fighting for you. Remember, those curses in Deuteronomy are God's love being played out, trying to trip you every time you run away. And just before you get to full speed, he puts an obstacle in your path. And then you run into a wall and you fall over and you go, oh, my face. And you're like, ooh. But if I didn't put that wall in the way, you would have jumped off the cliff. So Father is sitting there lovingly fighting for you the best way he knows how. And it's sad to say, but most of us only understand. We look up and our bums hit the floor. It's only through difficult times do we cling to Father. It's only through difficult times do we ask him to intervene. How many of you have prayed for his intervention and help when the money's been coming in? Everything's going right. No one. No one says, oh, please, Father, help me. I've got too much money. You know?
Who shall I give it to?
Everything is going so well. I need your help. I'm freaking out. No, we sit down and we get to a place and we go, no, look, if you don't intervene, the thing is we need to be able to be constant when we have lots and when we have little. Paul said, I have learned to be content when I've had too much and when I've lacked. God doesn't change. My situation might change. People might let you down. Things might not go the way you hoped. God is constant. Or your prayer is constant.
Vince,
Yeah?
maybe a little bit of an opposite picture on that
Mhm.
is, what just came to mind is sometimes we often blame our Satan
Oh,
for
yeah.
when God is actually dealing with us. We think this is an attack from Satan,
Yes.
but in the meantime it's actually Hashem dealing with us.
Yeah.
You know? So I think that happens quite frequently when we don't
Yes.
always need to blame Satan. We will think, Lord, are you dealing with me?
Yeah.
Hashem, are you dealing with me? What's happening?
Or what am I doing?
Yeah, what am I doing that's causing it?
Yeah, we never ever want to take the blame for our situations, right? All right? Israel has to get to the point where they acknowledge that they're leaning on someone else instead of leaning on God. What is going to get them saved? Pharaoh? Last I checked it, his name meant bondage. I don't think he saved anyone. He couldn't even save his own son. That was a tough lesson to learn. But God saved a young boy from growing up in that same mindset. Think about it. He took that firstborn son, he saved him from his father's mindset. Keep him safe so he didn't get into the state of arrogance to the point of death. Let us not get stuck in someone else's business when God is busy dealing, and let us stay focused on what we need to do. So when Abba says move, then he knows it's at that time when that person is contrite and humble and be able to understand that that help is coming from him. Okay? On the first day of the first month of the 27th year, the word of Adonai came to me. Human being, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babel, had his army mount a massive expedition against Tyre. Okay, we learned about that, right? There was a massive siege against Tyre and Sidon. Tyre is Tyre. The loads of dirt they carried away made every head bald and every shoulder raw. Yet neither he nor his army derived any benefit from Tyre out of the expedition that went up against it. A 13-year siege, and you go and you conquer land, and you're going to pay your troops as soon as we get in there, man. What was the problem? Why didn't Nebuchadnezzar get paid when he conquered Tyre?
Because all the wealth we moved to Egypt.
Right, they moved it over onto the little island, and it was a stalemate. They could take care of old Tyre, but they couldn't take care of the new one. It was just too strong. So if we're going to go in and we say, boy, we're going to get spoils of war, everything's going to be great, and sorry, there's no money here. After 13 years of fighting, that's a pretty big backlog for wages, right? But God says here, he says, therefore Adonai Elohim says, I will give the land of Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel. He will carry off its riches, take its spoil and its prey, and these will be wages for his army. I am giving him the land of Egypt as his wages for which he worked, because they were working for me, says Adonai Elohim. When that day comes, I will cause power to return to the house of Israel, and I will enable you, Ezekiel, to open your mouth among them. Then they will know that I am Adonai. Alright? When did they exactly conquer Egypt?
Isn't it? No, not 571 BC when Sennacherib.
Sennacherib was leader of which?
Oh, no, wait, that was Assyria. Never mind.
Syria, right? Anybody?
Oh, God.
Fastest things first.
Chapter
Google.
26 was 586.
Who
Chapter
can't
15
get?
must be 590.
Try Google. Did
Chapters on
Babylon
order.
or did Nebuchadnezzar ever conquer Egypt? While you're
No,
there.
because what's his name? With the C.
Ah, there we go.
Not Cyprus.
Karchemish.
Gargamesh.
Gargamesh.
Gargamesh was a battle that took place north of Israel. It was pivotal in the way that Egypt came up and they wanted to take them, and Babylon smacked their mums and sent them out.
605 BC.
605 they conquered
That's the Battle of Karchemish.
Gargamesh, and we're dealing with a timeline of around 587 right now, 586.
So that doesn't make sense.
Mm.
That would have been before.
Mm. So 605 happened when they were coming in, right?
I'm saying the years 1 through 40.
I know, but we saw from
Yeah.
I think
No,
it's
it will still give you a year. Sure.
okay. First day of the month, the end of the siege of Tyre, which happened around 573.
Is this the same time they were in Jerusalem and then they told the king not to go to Egypt, to flee to Egypt because they were going to be taken over, and then he does flee to Egypt and gets captive
No.
and taken? Was that is it?
Well, that happens.
And that was-
That kind of happens later. That was after the Zedekiah. But yeah. Anybody see anything?
In 568 BC, during the rule of Emesis.
Hmm?
586 BC, during the rule of Emesis, it seems like he conquered it then.
He got all the way to the border.
568.
April the 26th, 571.
What are you saying? Don't you love archaeological sites? We all guesstimate more or less, but the simple fact of the matter is, Nebuchadnezzar himself never conquered the fullness of Egypt. He actually got all the way up to the border post, took it up to that point, and that's kind of where he stopped. It was later through Cambyses, who was actually Persian, who came up and actually conquered the fullness of Egypt. Okay? But if we look at it, Persia conquered Babylon, Babylon became Persia. It was a euphemism for the same thing and actually gets fulfilled later. Okay? But not the way we see it, or not the way we understood it to be. Anyway, okay? So it is a funny little thing where people sit there and people are still scratching their heads to this day going, how does this work? We don't really know. Many scholars are confused about it, but it was probably more fulfilled through Cambyses. All right? Chapter 3. The word of Adonai came to me, human being, prophesy that Adonai Elohim says, wail, oh no, it's today, for the day is near, the day of the Lord. Please pause. Day of the Lord.
Judgment.
End of days.
All right. Is it a specific day?
Sorry, Vince.
Yeah.
Can I digress a little bit?
So,
What's this human being story?
human
We
being.
see right throughout Isaiah as well.
He's kind of you're reminding him of Adam. Okay, so Adam, you're the dust. All right?
Okay.
But it's a title as well that they normally give to when he talks to the prophets. In some cases, he'll like refer to Daniel. He'll say "Son of Man." You'll actually,
Okay.
or in Ezekiel itself, I think he called him Son of Man as well.
Yes.
He said Ben Adam. So it's when you hear human being, it's a reminder that you come from Adam.
Okay.
All right. So that which you have been created again, Adonai Elohim fits into the time of understanding of its creation. And man, you will understand that I am the creator, you're the created, and I want you to carry that message through to the people because they've lost that idea. All right? So he says, the day of Adonai, a day of clouds, the time of the Goyim.
Yes.
Is it?
Day of the Lord. Very big in the prophets. Very, very big. You're looking at Amos, Isaiah, Joel, Obadiah, Zephaniah, Zechariah, Thessalonians 1, 2, and 2 Peter all talk about the day of the Lord. All right? Now, we can stop and we can look at it and we can go, okay, what is the day of the Lord? Short version. Time of judgment. The time when God is going to get ready to judge his creation. And is that judgment going to be a 1 minute, 1 day scenario?
Doesn't look like
No, it doesn't look like it because it kind of happens in stages, right? Remember? He comes on the clouds and then sets up which kingdom? Millennial reign, right? And at the end of millennial reign, there's the time of the great judgment, what we call the white throne judgment. I think it's Revelations 20, right? And he sets up and then he opens up the book of life, and then it says, you know, the sea will give up their dead, and the graves will give up their dead, and he will sit down, and everybody that was born will now stand and answer, except for the dead in Christ who were raised first. Right? So we were dealt with probably pre-millennium, right? Okay, everybody caught up, first resurrection. Then we get into the second and perhaps a third resurrection when he's talking about those of the sea and those that come out the grave. All right, I don't know if this is the practical thing where he goes, let's deal with the grave first and then we'll deal with those who come out of the sea. I don't know, but it's a lot of people, so it's going to take some time. So he's going to sit up and he's going to deal with this, but this time of judgment, this time that he's going to hold everybody accountable for what they do. If you look at Amos and you look at these guys, the Jews or Israel was saying, you just wait until the day of the Lord comes. You just wait, you're going to get your story. And Amos says to them, not so fast. Because everyone who has done wrong is going to be judged in that way. There's a saying that said, rather a day of rain than the day of the Lord. Why?
It's going to be hard on people.
Rain blesses everybody, righteous and unrighteous. The day of the Lord, unrighteous. It's going to be difficult for people. It's going to be difficult for everybody. Right? You walked away from God. You've not done. You've spurned it. You didn't know about it. Are you going to stand before this King of Kings of everything and you're going to give an account for your life? If that doesn't make you nervous, you've made your God too small. He's going to stand there and he's going to look at you and he says, I gave you life. What did you do? I gave you a marriage. What did you do? I gave you children. What did you teach them? I gave you a place of work. I gave you a car. I don't know. He's going to ask you what you've done. And he might scrutinize every single thing in your power that you have affected. And he wants to know, did you follow my instructions? Did you teach your children? Did you teach your wife? Did you submit? Did you lift your family up? Did you tell them about me? I don't know about you guys, but when you go to those scriptures, and I'll give you a list now, and you go and you study them, me, I'm hiding behind Yeshua. Right? Even then I'm nervous, because I wanted being a smile on my father's face. I want him to say, well done, good and faithful servant. Well done, my son, come home. I want him to be pleased with what I left. But even then, I know how much I get wrong. I need Yeshua to cover me, to say, look, I never got this perfectly right, but I tried, and I asked you to change me, and I asked you to panel beat me, and I asked you to bring your ruach and flow through me, because I cannot do this. To be a husband, I need God to flow through me so that I can be the man my wife deserves. To be a father, same thing. Okay? To be an employee, to be a brother. Never mind to be a teacher. You need him in every aspect of your life, because you reflect him in every aspect of your life, and you will be accountable for everything. Now that responsibility comes in when you get to stand and you get to understand that you are affecting people's salvation. You are affecting their lives, their eternity. Now you can be a part to pull up the body, or you can sit back and say, not for me, and you can break it down. There's no middle ground. You either belong to him or you don't. And that's not a family decision, that's an individual decision. My family did not understand when I gave my life to God. But I know I needed him, and I know I needed to stand there for him. And I said, look, I'm not doing this to be popular. I'm doing this because you've saved me. How can I go back on what I know now? And as difficult as it is, you might be that very person that it talks about so often in Scripture. Are you the one that's going to stand in the gap for your family? Are you the one that's going to stand in the gap and intercede for your household? Are you the one that's going to lead other people at work to him, even if you save one? Even if you affect your one, might go and save 3 more. We don't know. All I know is we had 11 people on fire for God, and look what it did. 11 disciples that were really on fire. There are books full of what that does. We've got one man, Ezekiel, sitting out there in the middle of nowhere, going, okay, Abba, what do you want me to tell these people? And we're sitting looking back at the words that he spoke, and how it reverberates through time even now. You can look at Egypt and you can go, why didn't you listen? So it's here. So I can ask you the same thing. If he has given you a testimony and you choose to ignore it, what are you doing? Do you want to be like Egypt, or are we going to stand up firm and we're going to say, no, we're going to stand with Israel? The right part of Israel, not the grumpy part. Okay? So the day of the Lord, you can mark these down. Amos 5, Isaiah 13, Joel, basically 1, 2, and 3. Obadiah 15. It's probably verse 15. Yeah. Zephaniah 1. Obadiah verse 15. There's only one page.
Oh.
Zephaniah.
Zephaniah chapter 1. Zephaniah 1, Zechariah 14, Thessalonians 5, 2 Thessalonians 2, and 2 Peter 3. to some scriptures. There are some interesting ones in the illusions of millennial reign and things like that. A lot all over Isaiah and Jeremiah and those places, but that will at least give you a sense of what it is to come. Okay? The day of clouds, the time of the Goyim, verse 4, the sword will come against Egypt, and Ethiopia will be in anguish when the slain fall in Egypt, when they take away their wealth. So Ethiopia is really upset because their money disappears. And the foundations are torn down. Ethiopia, Put and Lud, all the mixed population of Kuv, and all the people of allied lands will die by the sword with them. Remember, you go to the Table of Nations, I think it's Genesis 10. Right? If you want to look for the ancient names of these things, and then you can tie back. Adonai says this: those supporting Egypt will fall. Its arrogant power will be brought down from Migdal to Sibnah. They will die by the sword, says Adonai Elohim. They will be desolate even when compared with desolate countries. Likewise, her cities will, in comparison with their ruined cities. So he reiterates the same thing. They will know that I am Adonai. Okay, this time it's not Adonai Elohim, it's the Yud Heh Vav Heh, right? When I set fire to Egypt and those supporting it are destroyed, when that day comes, I will send out messengers to ships in ships to terrify the unsuspecting Ethiopians, and anguish will overcome them on the day of Egypt. Yes, here it comes. Adonai Elohim says, I will destroy the hordes of Egypt through Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel. He and his people, and the most barbarous of the nations, will be brought in to ravage the land. They will unsheath their swords against Egypt. They will file down the land of corpses. Okay, so let's stop there. He destroyed the hordes of Egypt because Egypt actually came up to come and fight them at Gilgamesh. They lost. All right? The people that came down much later, again, like I said, Cambyses, and those who came into the land. I will dry up the streams of the Nile and sell the land to the wicked. Through the power of the foreigners, I will make the land and all that it is desolate. I Adonai have spoken. Okay. This is quite an interesting little study if you want to get into it. When you look at drying up the Nile, that's happened a few times in recent history. Okay, 2012 and 2018. Right? There's something called the Aswan Dam that they built, and apparently it's wreaking havoc with the ecological situation that's going on there. Because they built this dam, now the things are not flowing as it should, and it's causing a major thing. So again, something man-made. We will keep our water, and when it floods, we'll be okay. And now all of a sudden, literally everything is just being thrown out of whack. All right, so this is not something that we're looking at the Nile and we think, okay, that's never happened. I found it quite surprising that as recently as last year and in 2012, that it's happened. Okay? So on two different occasions within the last 10 years, he's busy dealing with them on top of this. Okay, so stuff that he was talking about is, funny enough, we're seeing the repercussions of now.
I just counted the years in between. 6.
Well, here is what Adonai Elohim says. I will destroy the idols, make the false gods of north cease to exist. No longer will there be a prince from the land of Egypt. I will put fear in the land of Egypt, desolate Petros, set fire to Soan, execute judgments in No, pour my fury on Sin and stronghold of Egypt, and destroy the hordes of No. Yes, I will set fire to Egypt. Sin will ride in anguish. No will be torn apart. These are cities, right? Enemies will attack north in broad daylight. The young men of On and Piveset will die by the sword, while the cities themselves will go into captivity. At Safan case, the day will grow dark when it breaks the yokes of Egypt. Then the pride she takes in power ceases. A cloud will cover her, and her daughters will go into captivity. Thus I will execute my judgments on Egypt, and then they will know that I am Adonai. Okay. All with us so far? Happy news?
Mhm.
On the 7th day of the first month of the 11th year, the word of Adonai came to me. Human being, I have broken the arm of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. It has not been bound up by dressings and bandages, so that it can heal and become strong enough again to wield the sword. All right, so he's going to give him a lasting wound, so that he'll take away his strength. Why didn't God say, I'm going to chop off his head? Why does he break an arm?
Still comes for repentance. He always wants to come back.
Why? I'll wound you to make you realize that you're not all that you think you are. Okay? Therefore, Adonai Elohim says this: I am against Pharaoh, king of Egypt. I will break his arms, both the sound one and the broken one, and I will make the sword fall from his hand. I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and disperse them throughout the countries. I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babel and put my sword in his hand, but I will break the arms of Pharaoh. He will groan like a man mortally wounded. Yes, I will hold up the arms of the king of Babel and put the arms of Pharaoh, or the arms of Pharaoh will droop. They will know that I am Adonai. When I put my sword in the hand of the king of Babel and he stretches it out over the land of Egypt, yes, I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and disperse them throughout the countries, and they will know that I am Adonai. So God again says, well, like any good shepherd, instead of breaking a leg, he's going to break some arms, because the very thing that he's using to,
Fights as well.
yeah, not only fight everybody else, but fight against God, right? Taking away his strength.
I suppose it's also a picture of, God pulled out Israel with an outstretched arm, and here he's breaking the arm of Pharaoh at the same
Yeah.
time.
It's like that which you relied on is now going to be taken away. It's like drying up the Nile, okay?
Sorry, Vince. 1 till 19 could happen again, but 20 till 26, would you say that happened already? Like with the people being not true Egyptians anymore?
Well, I'd say that there is no Pharaoh, so I think that happened a while ago, right? So there's no one there is going to stand up and claim any sort of deity like they did. No one can stand up and acknowledge. Because how do you elect a new Pharaoh?
We don't really, no? Or do
You can,
Okay.
but think about it this way. Ptolemy, how did Ptolemy, knowing that they've conquered Egypt, become the next Pharaoh, him being a Greek?
Through might.
Through Alexander. Alexander conquered them, claimed deityship and Pharaoh. Right? Ptolemy hijacked the body of Alexander's funeral procession, brought it down and said, we will bury the old Pharaoh, and he said, I'm the new Pharaoh, so therefore
It's convenient.
he got elected because he had the body of the previous one. Right? You've got to understand Egyptian logic a little bit. So they understood their processes, but right now, who can stand up and say? No one. They're not a military power. They don't have effective leadership. They fight more than anything else. The place has got nothing. The things that they used to rely on, they can't sell. Their knowledge is drying up. Their leadership has fallen to pieces. What's left? It's a slum. I just said, you know what? You every time I gave you an opportunity to repent, every time, even after 40 years, even if I fixed this, even if I let you be conquered, even if I did that, you didn't listen. It's the same as what he did for Israel. He said, how many times do I have to beat you guys senseless? Until there was a great regathering, and then we're slowly starting to see them coming back into the land. At the end of days, Egypt will have a great regathering. In the sense that they're going to regather and align themselves up with God. Okay? Like I said, Isaiah 19. If we get there. All right. So it's interesting that someone, I mean, think about it as this. Could you imagine, and God forbid if this is not his will, someone like Donald Trump with all the power of all the states and everything, that all that military might, turn around to be as powerful as Zimbabwe?
What?
Zimbabwe.
Oh.
Right? How do we go from that wealth and power and weaponry and leadership and structure and all of that to a place like Zimbabwe? Very simple. Take away God's glory, intervene where he's trying to deal, and think it's all about you, you're going to get brought down. And if you don't learn repeatedly, well, there's no point. I can't give you wealth, I can't give you leadership. Every time I give you that, you think it's about you. But if I then am able to regather you and start teaching you about me, maybe you'll forget about the wealth and power and realize that everything is about me. Right? Those are things that are going to come in the future. All right, something for Egypt to look forward to. All right, chapter 31. On the first day of the 3rd month of the 11th year, the word of Adonai came to me, human being, say to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and his hordes, whom are you like in greatness? Like Ashur, Assyria, a cedar in Lebanon? Okay, why does he use a cedar?
Big tree.
Tall, strong, smelt nice, used for big buildings, something that was sought after, something that was envied. The cedars of Lebanon was something that was envied. And to be tall and upright was someone who had stood head and shoulders above everybody else, okay? It had beautiful branches, dense foliage, its tall crown surrounded by leafy boughs. The water nourished it, the deep made it grow, sending its rivers round the place where it had planted, sending its streams to all the trees in the fields. Okay, let's pause there for a second. What rivers?
He's talking about Assyria.
Yeah.
He's talking about the Euphrates,
And?
Tigris.
Right, okay. Which should remind you of, is there a missing link there somewhere? What else was things planted by beautiful streams, a mighty tree that you should have eaten from or not?
There's a couple of rivers missing from that.
Oh, there's a couple of rivers missing, but it's in the region, right?
Yeah.
Okay? So he's again making the pun of, again, you were created, you were beautiful, you were lush, you were tall, you were ... So it grew taller than any other tree. Its branches grew in number and spread far and wide, for it had plenty of water to make them grow. In its boughs all the birds of the air had their nests. Okay, now let's stop. We've heard of something like that before.
Kingdom of heaven.
It's the kingdom of heaven.
The mustard
You called it.
seed.
A mustard seed. Okay? A mustard seed is what type of tree?
It's a weed.
It's a weed. It's not a tree.
It's a shrub. It's a bush.
Yeah. It should grow all of about maybe 1.5 meters and become very bushy, and you should actually pull it out. No one plants that type of tree in the Middle East. Right? Now you're talking about someone where he says, and someone planted a mustard seed. I mean, and then the guy was thinking, what a tomkot? What is he doing? I mean, why would you plant that in your garden? And it says, it grew and it became.
Became big enough to house the birds of the air.
What's the moral of the story?
God can change something that's seemingly useless into something great.
Right. And what about the birds of the air? We've got two different plays on this.
Yeah. So the birds of the air can be referenced sometimes for good things.
Uh-huh.
If you look at Noah, the story of Noah, but it can also be used for nice other things. This is a family show. Yeah, it brings about eating away of things.
Okay, so Yeshua uses it in two different ways. Number one, it says this mustard tree grew up and it became a place where the birds would nest. Now, why would that be important to the Creator?
Because he looks after even the birds of the air, and so how much more would it look after?
He looks after creation, so that if he takes you, whom the world might think is useless and insignificant, a weed, and he plants you in his garden, and he makes you grow, you become a refuge for those wicked.
Doesn't this also relate back to the days of creation, when he created the swarms, right?
Yeah.
He said, go forth and multiply. So there's a multiplication factor in it.
It does. The bigger you grow, the more people can come and nest underneath you. You become a refuge, in a sense, okay? But there's also another aspect where the birds came, remember the parable of the sower?
Like the word.
They stole the word. Okay, so now you have some people that will say the birds are a picture for demonic activity. I wouldn't go that far.
That's creepy.
Okay, but it's interesting that he uses this for Assyria to grow nice and tall, but instead of becoming a refuge for other creation, Assyria was what? Slave traders. Right? So again, they ate up and destroyed any bit of faith or any bit of word that was left around. Remember, it was Sennacherib who sent the Rabshakeh, his general, down to take on Hezekiah. And he said, do you think your God will save you?
Basically mocking him at the walls.
Says, your God sent me here. He wasn't wrong. God said judgment was coming from the north. And he says, weren't the tribes behind me, the northern tribes of Israel, weren't they praying to the same God? And look where they are. Except there was a slight difference. We had golden calves in the northern territory of Israel. They were worshipping golden calves.
2 of them.
Yes, right? Here you have him come up against him, and Hezekiah goes down on his knees and he says, Lord, look at what they're saying. They're saying, you cannot save us. 185,000 Assyrians, greatest army on the face of the planet, verse 100. The rest of the story is written.
And Sanherib actually wrote a tale about that, although he didn't obviously put himself in a bad light. It's called the Jerusalem Prison, which he wrote the annals of himself.
Yeah.
And he wrote on there all of his conquests that he did, but when it came to Jerusalem, he said that I locked him up like a bird in a cage, and then I left.
Yeah.
But he never left the battle. He always went, he took over. So what made him leave? And if you read 2
Yeah.
Kings, it tells you.
His army was completely wiped out.
Yeah. Ran away.
Yeah, more than one reason, right? So we have 2 interesting plays here. Assyria, we could say, instead of housing, becoming a refuge for God's creation, maybe use God's creation to destroy other creations, okay? Use it, don't use it. Beneath its branches, all the wild animals gave birth to the young, and all the great nations lived in its shade. No one was more powerful. It was beautiful in its greatness and the length of its branches, because its roots went down with plenty of water. No cedar in God's garden was like it. We have another image here. Who was great and tall as a tree? Someone from Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar, right? Daniel 4 will give you this image, and he says, you are tall, great, massive tree. And he's like, yeah, that's right. And then God says, well, I'm going to humble you a little bit. And in Daniel 4, he strikes him down with what?
Goes crazy and eats.
He thinks there's an
Goes into
animal.
the wood, yeah.
All right. The medical term for that is lycanthropy. Okay, it's a very rare psychiatric disease today that makes you think you're an animal. All right. So God uses something, and then all of a sudden Nebuchadnezzar goes into this whole story, and he's chewing grass, thinking he's a cow, chilling up in the gardens, and this was the great Nebuchadnezzar. And then eventually, after the allotted period of time, wakes him up, and it says his hair was like eagle's feathers, like probably some serious dreadlocks. And he was sitting over there, and then all of a sudden, what does Nebuchadnezzar say? Can any of you remember the story? If you want to go back to the passage, it's Daniel 4 from verse 19.
He praises God.
Mhm. It's a very, very interesting little portion. Daniel 4. He gets given a dream from verse 10 to 12. He gets the interpretation from 19. And then after about that time, he has this massive declaration. Fastest things first.
Yeah, because some people actually believe he wrote chapter 4
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. They don't believe that.
And I bless the Most High and praised Him,
He blessed the Most High and praised Him.
whose rule is everlasting.
So all of a sudden you have a guy, what verse is that?
34.
You have a guy who believed he was the greatest among men, who worshiped pagan gods, and we see him, once he's humbled, he doesn't moan, he doesn't complain, he doesn't say, God, how can you do this to me? He praises God because he acknowledged that someone was greater than he was. And it's interesting, I've heard of 1 or 2 commentators say this, I'm in that group as well. I believe that Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged God and was saved from that point. Not saved through obviously the blood of the Messiah, it wasn't there yet, but he developed a relationship with God because of his declarations. You see him praising God, right? And that is very few and far between when you hear about a pagan nation. It's a very, very interesting piece. All right? So from this, we should hear this, but Pharaoh, Assyria, unfortunately we don't. All right? I'm going to read from verse 8, back in Ezekiel. No cedar in God's garden was like it. No cypress tree could compare it with its boughs. No chestnut tree could rival its branches. No tree in God's garden could match its beauty. I made it so beautiful with its many branches. All the trees in Eden, God's garden, envied it. Hang on a second. I thought we were talking about Pharaoh. Now all of a sudden he likens him to the king of Assyria. We see a picture of Nebuchadnezzar. We see what does that represent? Pharaoh, Assyria, and Babylon. Is that the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of man? Man. Did they all worship God? Absolutely not. So who did they belong to? Hasatan. And if Hasatan was the tallest of the trees in the garden, he was supposed to be the one envied because he was beautiful. And he was lifted up and he was supposed to be a refuge. Instead, he comes to steal, maim, and destroy, and his birds don't act the way the parable of the sower goes. And they steal the world instead of the birds, right, being nestled under his branches. He was made to nurse creation. And what did he do? He destroyed it. Okay, so just like we had with Tyre, we have images of this popping up again. Therefore, here is what Adonai Elohim says. Because you are so tall, because he has lifted his crown above the leafy boughs, because he has grown so arrogant about his height. Again, arrogance with the king of Tyre, arrogance over here, and when you look at Daniel and the little horn, arrogance again, the Antichrist, the false prophet, it's all arrogance. It is one of the key identifications that you will have when you look for anybody who belongs to the camp of Satan. He's arrogant. What does arrogance mean?
You believe so much in yourself and your own strength.
It means you're God. You're challenging his authority by saying you want to be like him. Isn't that what he got Eve to do? If you eat this, you will become like him. Right? He enticed him with probably what was his desire. Right? He was the most beautiful. He was like almost the highest form of angel, and yet it was still not enough for him. Don't get stuck into the situation when you think you're more than what you really are. No matter how high he lifts you up, no matter how much he flows through you, it has got nothing to do with you and everything to do with him. It is one of the quickest ways to fall, because you steal God's glory. Remember, that was a trap that Moses got into because he was grumpy. Remember the trap? Right? Wanted water, God provided water again. God wasn't angry that he said, Moshe, go and do this. The words that came out of Moses' mouth, shall we provide water for you? He portrayed that he was angry when God wasn't angry. And he said, Aaron and I, we will do this, when it was God providing. When they start looking to you more than they look to God, that's when God has to lovingly remove you sometimes, because they're going to become people followers. Well, we have to be very careful, guys. God understands how we're wired. All right? Sometimes he will lift up people to help you understand certain things and to be able to help you lead. Okay? Help you be led. Right? I'm going to talk about this on Shabbat, when you talk about the rabbi discipleship scenario, when we talk about the kings, when we talk about the prophets, we talk about Moses, we talk about Joshua. He gives us leaders that we should follow, right? But when we become people followers instead of God followers, that's when we start to do it. Ministries are built and ministries die because people follow that person, and they know the person doesn't teach them to follow God. And let's just use a silly example. Billy Graham. Who takes over Billy Graham's ministry when Billy Graham's not Names on the building. What did John the Baptist say when people were leaving him and they were starting to follow Yeshua? He said, it's good that I become less so that he can become more. With Moses and Joshua, he understood. Moses understood that he was giving it over to Joshua. When Joshua was zealous, when asked God to give them the 70 leaders, and 2 people in the camp were prophesying because the Holy Spirit was poured out, and Joshua said, we need to stop them. Moses says, are you zealous for me? I wish that every one of you had a relationship like that. I wish every one of you would prophesy. I wish every one of you would be thought like those 2. I remember the disciples had the same thing. You know, people were busy doing this. Yeshua said, no, we're going to stop them. And Yeshua said what?
They're not against us. Yeah.
If they're co-workers, buddy, let's go. See, this is about the kingdom dynamic. This isn't about us. One day we're going to be gone. And we're going to leave a footprint. And it's either going to point towards God and it's going to point towards our tomb. There's a reason God didn't allow Moses to get buried and the people understood where he was. Even today they call it the law of Moses. It drives me nuts. It had nothing to do with Moses. It was the law of God. And if you knew exactly where Moses was, how many people would make pilgrimage up and then would go worship at their tomb? Good rabbis today go to sages where they died and they sit on, it's a Jewish holiday called Lag BaOmer. It's probably one of the most unkosherest things you could probably do. But anyway, they go sit and they lie on top of the graves of these guys and they want their spirits, because they believe on this time that their spirits will come up and then they will fill them. These are people that follow the word of God. Why? Because someone great has gone before you and you want to aspire to that same greatness. No. It was God flowing through them that you're really after. He's still here. Why don't you look to him to fill you so that you lead other people to him? Do not become a Vincentite or a Nickite or a Renoite. Don't get stuck on the people. Get stuck on the word. Get stuck in your relationship with God so that you can follow him. And we can leave a legacy for other people to follow him even when we're not here. That's ultimately what we're about. You create a disciple and you teach him to follow him. Nothing less, nothing. Okay? All right. I think 11, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I'm handing him over to the mightiest of nations who will certainly deal with him as his wickedness deserves. I reject him. Foreigners, the most barbarous of the nations, will destroy him and leave him dying where he is. His branches will lie fallen on the mountains and the valleys. His boughs will lie broken on all the rivers of the land, and all the peoples of the earth will withdraw from the shade and leave him. They will no longer trust in him. All the birds will settle on his fallen trunk, and all the wild animals will bear on his branches. This is to warn all the trees growing near the water not to grow so tall, not to lift their crown above the leafy boughs, and all that take up water not to reach up in their height. For they are all given over to death, to the depths of the underworld, along with human beings, with those who descend into the pit. So if we wanted to take that further, he's talking about Revelation, he's talking about the great judgment that's going to come where even Satan himself will be destroyed. Okay? Here is what Adonai Elohim says. On that day he descended to Sheol. What Sheol?
Grave.
It's grave, it's death. Okay? He uses generally 2 words in here. Okay? Sheol, 9 times out of 10. Grave. Just die. Okay? You go to the earth. What's the word Yeshua uses for hell? Or the picture he uses for hell? Gehenna. Okay? Gehenna is literally 2 words. Gay, right? You know what a gay is?
Sharp Valley.
A sharp valley. A sharp valley, okay? And where else? Where was that sharp valley? Gehenna?
Which is the
Gehinnom.
valley behind the temple.
It was called Ben Hinnom Valley, and it became Gehinnom Valley. Okay? Now what happened at that valley?
All the rubbish got dumped there.
Yeah. the railway waste,
Rubbish,
Sewage.
dead
Bodies.
animals, whatever was it there. And then he gives you this image because they needed to get rid of it. What did they do?
Burned it.
They burnt it up. Okay? So it's an eternal fire because it never went out. There was always rubbish to be burnt. And it says the worm will never die. Why? Because there's always death and decay. Right? And he takes that picture and he says, you want to know what's waiting for you? That's what you're going to get. Now just stop and take for a second the smell and the picture and the burning and the decay and compare that to the God of life in the Garden of Eden. How foreign, how opposite it is to what was planned, to what it's become. Our God is a God of life. He chooses life. He begs people to choose life. He doesn't want you to seek decay. Right? So when we talk about Sheol, Sheol is just going, he's dying, he's in the grave. Okay? So on that day he descended to Sheol, on the day he died, I caused the abyss to mourn. Interesting. And cover itself for him. What's a picture of the abyss? What? The sea. What's another parallel for the sea? The beast in Revelations comes out of the sea. Is it talking about the ocean?
People.
Okay, also an idea that it comes out the nations. Okay, those who are of the nations is also an illustration of the sea in the Hebraic mindset. I held back its rivers so that its deep waters were stopped. I made the Lebanon mourn for him, and all the fields withered because of him. At the sound of his fall, I made the nations shake. When I hurled him down to Sheol with those who descended to the pit, all the trees of Eden, and pick up the best in the Lebanon, and all that take up water. So his judgment doesn't just carry on with life, it carries on even into Sheol. They were consoled to the underworld. They descended with him to Sheol, to those who were killed by the sword, to those who were his fighting arms. So if you think back to Pharaoh, he broke his arms, so that's what he relied on, his armies. Those among the nations who lived in his shade, which of these trees of Eden was your equal in glory or size? Yet you will be brought down to the underworld along with the trees of Eden. Okay? You will lie there among the uncircumcised. Interesting phrase. Why?
And so it links to the nations again. So if you look at the Hebraic mindset with Sheol being nations as well, you have the uncircumcised here being the people that are not in covenant.
Right. Specifically covenant thinking. Remember, some nations practice circumcision. Phoenicians were one of them. Okay? They practiced circumcision, but it had nothing to do with covenant. It was a cultural thing for them. Okay? So you were circumcised, but you didn't know who God was. You worshipped idols. You did whatever you want. It wasn't just because of the circumcision of the flesh that now you understood who you were. Alright? It's the same way if you come in now and we use a silly example and you say, oh, praise God. Which one?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can be talking to a Buddhist, you can talk to a Hindu, you can talk to a Muslim, and they're going to say yes. But I can guarantee you they're not talking about the one you're talking about. Right? So we need to be just a little bit cautious. It says, with those that were killed by the sword, this is Pharaoh and his hordes. Remember, Pharaoh being the king of bondage is going to be destroyed in the pit. Death, it will not stop at death. There is going to become a judgment later.
Eternal death.
In eternal death. This is when we start talking about Satan again. It says Adonai Elohim. Is everybody feeling rather happy?
Lovely light reading.
All right. Look, it's 23 past. I don't want to rush through chapter 32 because we're going to pick up, never mind the fact that it's like 3 pages long. I want you guys to do a little bit of a study. I didn't pick it up in the beginning, but when it talks about Pharaoh sitting at the streams, the dragon is sort of an image for something called Leviathan.
What?
Leviathan. Okay. Now, there's two really weird animals that get mentioned in Scripture. One is called the behemoth, and one is called Leviathan. Now, I don't want you to go and look up or go and pull out what you had someone tell you about this, because we have some very interesting spiritual people that use ideas that have got no biblical base. I want you to frame them from a biblical point of view. And we are going to see that at one point they are animals, and if you can identify them, that would be fantastic. You will probably be the only person to identify them. But they also give you an illustration of something else. Okay? So when we look at chapter 32, it's going to mention it again. It's going to actually get referred to as the defeat of Rahab. Now that Rahab is again being used as a picture of Leviathan. You guys want me to give you some scripture, or you guys want to go and research this? All right. When you're looking at behemoths, you're going to go to Job chapter 40. Yeah, there's that. Job actually has for both chapter 38, chapter 40, and chapter 41. Okay? You've got Psalm 74, verses 12 to 17. Psalm 104, verses 7 to 9. There's one in Isaiah. Let me just check my notes quickly, because I don't know if I wrote that right. There's also Job 3. Yeah, there's a lot of weird things out there, guys. Cannot tell a lie. That when I was researching some of the stuff to even to the Jewish midrash, it was making me a bit crazy. Just check me on this one. I've got Isaiah 11 verse 15 and Isaiah 27 verse 1. And when you look at chapter 32, I also want you to do a parallel between the imagery. There's a big homework here. The imagery that he gives in the judgments, linking Pesach and Revelations. Don't worry, this is going to get a little bit fun.
What imagery gives him judgments?
In judgment, in chapter 32 of Ezekiel, you're going to see pictures that he used for Passover and images he uses, not necessarily in the same way, but I want you to focus on the pictures that you see in Revelations. Okay? And what he's going to do, what we're going to try and do is we're going to look at, you can look at the folklore if you like. The Jews have some very strange ideas. There's a specific blessing actually at Sukkot. Like I said, study the scripture reference. Then you can test that to see whatever else other people are saying about it. But please, 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 don't go running around looking at anything that starts with the spirit of Behemoth or the spirit of Leviathan. Okay? Scripture doesn't mention it that way. I don't want you to go down a rabbit hole that you don't need to go down. People have made the case of spiritual this and spiritual that. We don't see that anywhere in Scripture, so we stick to what is word-based. Okay? And then once we see them, you will see quite quickly, he mentions them very plainly as two specific animals. And then he goes on to giving it as different descriptions. The same way he did with the king of Tyre, the same way he did now with Pharaoh. You start off talking about you, and then it seems to carry on. And that's going to link you up with something that happens in Revelations again. All right, that's what you can figure out by yourself. All right? So have a quiz, have a look at that stuff, and that will be the last lament. That will probably take us, next week's session. But then we can just kind of share and break down, and what I like to do is show pictures. And we can write down each scripture reference, giving it what it is talking about. and then we can try and figure out what, where and what and how this should apply. Okay? Any questions, any thoughts? Lots of quiet? Fantabulous. Listen.
How do you spell Leviathan and Behemoth?
Leviathan. L-E-V-I-A. L-E-V-I-N-T-H-A-N.
And the other one?
Behemoth. B-E-H-E-M-O-T-H.
Is that thing with the horns?
With a big tail.
With the tail, it's like, it's a tail of, it's like cedar.
That's the big one.
And yeah, if you want to, as with all things, if you want to get a little inkling, look up the meaning of the names.
How do you spell that Leviathan? What do you know?
L-E-V-I-A-T-H-A-N.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to look up a little bit of Canaanite mythology, they call it Lotan. But that's going to lead you down a little bit of a rabbit hole that you might not want to go down.
It's a great one.
Yeah, it's too much. Alright, but it does kind of stem from Canaanite theology. It has sort of not the same application, and that's why I want you to get to study the scriptures first. Look at the scriptures and then see if anything else can add to that. If not, I mean, this stuff goes into the book of Enoch and it goes into all that stuff. You don't need to go there. Alright? We don't. This is our authority. Okay? Stick to what we have, and then we will build our framework around that. Alright, so anything else you find, anything else you want to share, then that's cool. And then we can kind of just build up this case and look at it from a scriptural point of view and see exactly how and where what fits. Alright. Father, we just thank you for your word. Thank you that we can just sit down as family, Lord Father, and we can just enjoy this time at your feet. Father, I thank you for flowing, Lord Father, that you would just lead us in your word, and that we would not just, that it wouldn't just be head knowledge of our, but that it would change our hearts and we may walk with you, Lord Father, closer. Father, we thank you. Thank you, Father, that even at the times when we build ourselves up, Lord Father, you fight for us to bring us down so that we may realize that it's got nothing to do with us and everything to do with you. Father, help us to keep us humble and contrite and close to you. Father, no matter what you do in our lives, as you fulfill our callings, as you finish the work that you do, that you've called us to do, and be the men and women that you've called us to be, Lord Father. But in all, may we remember to give you glory. May we lift up your name. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Just read it.